Part 3. So last time I was talking about, last time it was just pure negativity and ranting about, why Harry Potter sucks in book 1 as a protagonist, what is wrong with it in a lot of ways. I need to vent. And don't get me wrong, I am a Harry Potter fan. I really love what it becomes, but this first book is just so hard to take in a lot of ways. One of the parts of the videos that I'm gonna try to be doing in the future is a section of headcanons, changes and questions about each book, and what I would kind of do differently, and kind of the things that I had to drill down on and try to think why things were the way they were to make them that way in the Harry Potter universe. With Philosopher's Stone, my changes would be get a new protagonist and get a new plot. So that is a little too much. But in a more realistic way of some of the changes that I would make would be toning down, at the very least tone down, if not completely rewrite a lot of the things she put in there to be weird for weirdness sake, which some of them are kind of necessary because you have to make sure that she's setting up a world, she's setting up that is very different than normal life. So some of the things you do need to change. The fashion, why pointy hats would be fashionable in any universe is beyond me. But hey, if it works for them, it works for them. I could go with that. Why robes? Really, robe? Okay, I kind of get that. It's a very medieval clothes style, and for the most part, which does fit, how the Harry Potter world, kind of works, which is in a very medieval, setting still, which I personally do like and do understand, because if you have a force as powerful as magic that can solve all your problems so quickly and so easily, unlike technology, which requires a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of planning, I could see how you would quickly rise to a high plateau, and then because life is good enough and all the magical resources that you would need for that lifestyle are renewable enough, that then you would reach a very high plateau and stay there. Whereas technology, we've achieved a very comfortable life right now, but as any environmentalist will tell you, it's not a very renewable foundation that we've built it upon with fossil fuels and everything. So whether we want to admit it or not, the modern world, not only is it constantly changing, but it has to, because what we've built it upon is not the stablest of grounds. Whereas at least, and this is just my headcanon, the magical world, was built on, oddly enough, much more stable ground, because what fuels it is not something, is not something like oil, which, it is a fantastic resource, but will run out. Everything in the magical world, is either self-generated or constantly generating, that they can, power it. And so, in that kind of environment, why would it change? I mean, honestly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Which, I found surprisingly logical, and very good job to J.K. Rowling to kind of think that through and have it make sense. The little bits of technology that we do see is very 19th century. I mean, the Hogwarts Express, they barely have steam engines and photos and photography, which the photography itself, is probably very different and a much older magical thing, because it doesn't work like our photography does. Their cameras work very differently. Their culture, wizard culture, which granted you don't get nearly enough of in book one, but it works very differently, because there's not things like movies that people would go and see. That doesn't exist in the magical world. It's still a book-driven culture. There's there's barely radio, and that's been around since the early the early 19 teens, and took off in the 20s, and that's and that's a new technology to wizards. So that's a lot of world building, and granted, that wasn't all in Philosopher's Stone, but the seeds of it were, and so that much I can grant. I'll give credit where credit is due. She started that off great, and I like that technology physically doesn't work with magic. So it's not that the wizards are choosing not to have iPods and iPads and computers. It's that they physically don't function around the magic, which was a very smart thing to do. But if anybody ever continues the series, I would probably I would have someone figure out a way around that, just because, so that it can continue. But that's just my taste, which, if I'm ever put in charge of a Harry Potter, well, anyway. One of the things that I liked, which wasn't in the book, which would have made too much sense, but the first kind of villain, which is mostly just Voldemort's avatar, which is Quirrell. One of the touches I liked is that J.K. Rowling didn't make him Slytherin, which is the House of Evil. Instead, she made him a Ravenclaw, which I personally liked, because it, even in book one, she knew that having every single villain come from, a quarter of the school is a bad idea. Slytherin, I think, needed more development and more rounding in the book series, which I'm kind of sad that it didn't get, even through book 7. But because it's hard to believe that literally they're going to brand a quarter of the students every year as, quote, evil, and then just pass them along. I know Draco doesn't act like a nice guy, Snape doesn't act like a nice guy, Voldemort was a part of that house, but at least, and this is just my headcanon, one of the things that I would do is have every house be the House of Evil at some point. It just depends what era you're in. So, like, if you go back to, like, when Dumbledore was young, Gryffindor would have been kind of like the overlooked house, kind of like Hufflepuff is, and Ravenclaw is evil, and, Slytherin is the House of Good. That would have been, something funny. That's just, would be a fun idea. I kind of wish we could see what the Wizarding World was like when Dumbledore was Harry Potter's age going through Hogwarts. that would be a very, fun, side story or time travel story if they wanted to, have Harry Potter. The answer to some mystery is, from Hogwarts at that time. I would personally, love that. If that ever came to be, because Dumbledore, while he got a lot of development late in the series, he still is just, there's so little about him, and anyway, I already talked about that. One of the headcanons that I've always, well, at least one of the things that I always had trouble with, especially in part 1, in part 2, J.K. Rowling does a lot better job with this, which is the Dudley's abuse of Harry, which, in part 1, it's not just that it's, cartoonish, it's not that, how do I explain it? I did a lot of the things that, is considered abuse in, the book. I didn't have to sleep in a closet, but I cooked for my family, and I liked it, and it was something I was good at, whereas here it's, and I understand it's with a different connotation, a very Cinderellian connotation on it of he's being put upon to do it, which is just weird. It just comes off as weird, because if Harry Potter doesn't enjoy cooking, why would you, let him, why would he be in charge of that? I mean, I wouldn't imagine most 10-year-olds, unless they have a talent for it, wouldn't be very good cooks. So now you have crappy food, but you spited Harry Potter. Okay. I personally don't get that. Through the books and through the movies, I don't get how big the cupboard, the cupboard under the stairs is. At least in the movies, it looks like an actual room. I mean, granted, not a spacious room, but enough that he has a mattress, that he can, fully stand up. It has a light. It has, I mean, I'll fully admit it's not great, but it doesn't seem like the horrible, it doesn't seem like as dungeony as I think the book was trying to portray it. And so I have a harder time getting behind how put upon Harry is because of that. Because, I mean, if it's dusty, why doesn't he clean it? In fact, that's also one of the things that he's in charge of, is cleaning. So why doesn't he clean his own room if it's so dusty and terrible? So I had a harder time. The only other one that really stood out to me was Harry Potter getting a bad haircut, which, again, is not, I mean, I had bad haircuts growing up. It sucked until your hair grew out, but what I'm trying to get to is that the Dursleys, Dudley is definitely a jerk, there's no question about that. But the Dursleys, at least in book 1, did not seem that terrible. They didn't seem great, but there's a huge gulf between, actually criminally negligent, not good, not good, not good, neutral-ish, and then starting getting into the good. And in book 1, they were just not good. I mean, and I can kind of understand where Uncle Vernon, comes from with that. All of a sudden, he has to take care of his nephew-in-law, with, no compensation, no anything. It's just out of the blue. He has a child he has to take care of, pretty much because his wife's sister, said so, because his wife, said so. while trying to raise his own son, which, you know, you know, at the very least complicates, you know, their lives. You know, that's never addressed of, you know, of how they felt. You know, Dumbledore just put it upon them. You know, so Uncle Vernon, I definitely can understand that he never asked for Harry Potter in his life. He doesn't want him there. He very much would like him just gone. But oddly enough, that's not how he acts. And like I was saying in part 2, where you want to be shown, not told, Uncle Vernon's actions show a lot more caring than I think he's given credit for, because, and I know this is, you know, this may just be me going on a limb, but if he hates Harry Potter so much, why is he willing to go to the ends of the earth and practically beyond for him? I mean, that just seems strange and odd. Unless there was some kind of love or respect or something there. I mean, if he hated, I mean, if Uncle, and just talking about purely Uncle Vernon by himself at this point, if he hated Harry Potter so much, why isn't he just chucking him out the door as soon as the first Hogwarts letter comes and he's like, oh good, now you can be gone. Bam! Out the door. Goodbye! And then not letting him back in, you know, when he comes back at the end of the school year. That would be the most logical thing for him to do, but yet he not only does not do that, he does the opposite of it, which is, you know, trying to keep Harry from the magical world as best he can, which, even if he hates the magical world, it still solves the major problem of his life. So why would he do that? And which kind of gets to my headcanon of Aunt Petunia in book 1 of, they're doing these things to Harry at kind of this level, at kind of this jerky level, not full-blown abuse level, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to Dementor, you know, act like a Dementor, which we'll meet in book 3 and on, which is, if a wizard is depressed and miserable enough, they can't really use their magic, so then, you know, it kind of goes dormant, which, in fact, Aunt Petunia actually says when Hagrid shows up that they thought they could, you know, miserate the magic out of him, which makes a lot more sense. If this is done from a twisted sense of love, everything that they've done up to this point, until Harry is free and clear of the magical world, then things start to make a lot more sense, at least to me, because once that happens, once he's clear of that, then they can treat him, you know, like a person, as opposed to either a potential time bomb or a monster or anything like that, which makes a lot more sense, at least to me, for that Aunt Petunia character, especially after, you know, book 7, which, you know, skipping ahead a little bit, we find out that, you know, her sister, Harry's mom, you know, as soon as she found out about the magical world, it changed her immediately. She started hanging out with very different people who I could kind of see, you know, young Snape not being the greatest guy to hang out with. All of a sudden, because they're this thing, now you have to let people like, you know, Snape around, who had the very, I mean, at least the way it's portrayed, a very stereotypical trouble child, aura about him at the beginning, and then she never sees her sister. You know, she doesn't see her sister for, you know, most of a year at a time. can't be told, all she can get told is snippets of, where she's been, what she's been doing. And so you kind of, at least I got the feeling that what was going on with Petunia and Lily is that there was a very big, deep split between the two, and Petunia, at least Petunia could view it as losing her sister to this force, to this magic, and the magic is has taken her sister away, and changed her, and so and then I could feel that Petunia has this loss in her life directly to magic, and while she may have repressed it in herself, she or may not have. Personally, I could view it easier in my head that Petunia was as talented as Lily, but she just repressed it even in herself to the point where she couldn't go to Hogwarts. And so I just, my headcanon is that Petunia is acting very much out of love in book 1, and that's why they're willing to go to the ends of the earth to save Harry from a force that they view as not only evil, but it's going to destroy him. And they can't say it out loud because then that breaks what they're trying to do, what they're trying to keep him from. And so that just makes a lot more sense to me than they're just evil jerks, but at the same time, when given a way out of their problem, they don't take it. They not only don't take it, they go to the ends of the earth just to spite their 10-year-old nephew. And I have a harder time reconciling that version than this is, an unspoken, this is, a twisted form of love, which, and I'm going to talk more about this in, Chamber of Secrets with Dobby, but sometimes people's love is harder to take than hate, which, it's something I run into in my personal life, dealing with some people, which does make it as hard as it sounds to deal with, because if someone hates you, you know how to, just instinctually, at least I know how to much more deal with that, of, okay, they're attacking, defend, don't listen, block it out, yada yada. Whereas if they're coming at it and they're from a place of goodness, from what you think is, goodness and love, and it comes off badly or it is very venomous to you, but to them it's just normal, then it's a lot harder to just be like, no, because then you shut down the relationship, and it's just well, I'm going to talk more about that, in book 2. So at the end of part 3, in fact, I haven't even talked about one of the biggest things that I personally hated with it, which okay, I get that, J.K. Rowling had to try to show that wizards have a different culture, and I got that she needed to find some ways of showing that wizards are both similar to normal humans, but also a way that they're very different. And she used 2 different candy jokes in Philosopher's Stone, and one worked, and one I personally find horrifying. she went with jelly beans that in the wizarding world have, quote, every flavor, including, dirt and spinach and vomit, which I at least I kind of get. I don't like jelly beans myself, so they all taste like vomit to me. But I kind of get that. Okay, this is idea. This is kind of how wizard humor works. It's a little different. We're gonna make a joke candy, and at least in my mind, I would imagine there's some kind of sorting spell, or there's some way of dealing with trying to get rid of the horrifying candy that you're supposed to be using that they just don't say, or Harry Potter doesn't learn about. That would make sense. What doesn't make sense is fucking chocolate frogs. I mean, why? No. Oh. Okay, I know in real life we have chocolate bunnies for Easter. It's chocolate and it's shaped like an animal, and so you're kind of eating the animal. We have gummy bears. We do have these things in real life. But even if you had the spell, why would you make it come alive? Why would you then have your candy be a living entity that tries to preserve itself? Like the frog, it doesn't want to be eaten, so it'll literally jump out a window to avoid being eaten. And this is supposed to be yummy? This is supposed to be the fun? This is supposed to be the good candy? The every flavor jelly bean is the joke candy. This is supposed to be the real candy? And it comes off to me so horrifying and so bad and wrong, and why? And why? No. Why? Even if you could, there's not even a real world analog. If you could make some kind of edible robotics, and make a robotic Easter bunny, chocolate bunny, that still wouldn't be as horrifying as what they're doing in Harry Potter, because it's, depending on the level of AI, it still wouldn't have things like feelings, and it doesn't automatically, try to self-preserve. It just, it's hard to even describe how bad of an idea chocolate frogs are. Ugh. Ugh. No. I do not like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But, there are some good parts of it, and in part 4, I am gonna, discuss, some of the things that I did like. So, if you're tired of negativity, part 4 is gonna be, the things that I did like about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So, chocolate frogs are bad. I have to try to headcanon some of the stranger things in this book, but hopefully, but in part 4, I will find something about a Philosopher's Stone to like. So if you do want to hear that, stay tuned.